Hello and welcome. Tonight we're talking about living a normal-ish life with advanced breast cancer. I'm Adele Gautier from the New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation, and before we start I'll just run through some quick housekeeping. If you have any technical problems, there's a chat box on the left-hand side of your screen with an 0800 number you can call for help, or you can type in your problem and someone will get back to you on that. If you're having trouble with your sound, there's an 0800 number you can phone in to listen that way rather than using your computer. You can use the chat box during the webinar to ask questions that we will hopefully get to later, and you can even chat to other people. Don't worry about missing out on content. We'll be sending you a link to this online later in the week. Tonight we have three panellists who are going to share with us. Christine has lived with advanced breast cancer for many years. Sinda has worked in a supportive care role for people with advanced breast cancer, and Juliet is a health psychologist. First up, we'll hear from Christine. Christine, thanks so much for being here tonight. How about you just get started and tell us your experience?
Okay, thanks Adele. First up, what I wanted to say was that these are my experiences and these are my feelings. So it's a personal talk about what happened to me. Some of it may be of help to some people, maybe not, but it's my experiences. This is my cancer CV, just so you know I'm not faking it. All my surgeries, chemos, radiotherapies, drugs that I've taken, the drugs that I'm on, and where my secondaries are, and my liver and bone.
So, Christine, when you were diagnosed with advanced breast cancer, which is 10 years ago now, what was your reaction in terms of what did you do next?
Right. Well, being told I was terminal was a huge, huge shock. It was very frightening, and there was a feeling of hopelessness, because there's no way out. Well, there's only one way out, actually. When I had cancer, I just thought that it might be a couple of really horrible years where things were really tough and I would get through it and I would learn from the experience. But when I was told it was a terminal, I knew that this was now the end of my life. This is how I was most likely going to die. And it was very frightening. So I had to find ways of coping with that fear. One of them was to collect lots of information from all over the place, you know, from researching using Google to listening to people who told me eating 9 apricot kernels a day would save me, or going to South America to visit John of God. He would be able to heal me. And I gathered all this information up and then I culled it. And I culled it based on 3 things. What felt right for me, what I could afford, and what time I could manage. I mean, if I tried to do everything that people said, I'd have no time for living. So I needed to consider the time I had available. I also searched for success stories, and I didn't care whether there was a 10-year trial backing it up. I was quite happy to take anecdotal stories of success, and I didn't find many, but I searched hard. In fact, what I was looking for was someone like me. I would have really loved to have seen or heard someone like me talking about how they'd survived secondary breast cancer for so long. The other thing I did was read lots of inspirational books and try and be around inspirational people and think about inspirational ideas. And when I'd got all that set up, I did it. And I didn't just do it for a week, or I didn't just do it until a bad blood test result or a bad scan. I did it week after week, month after month, year after year. And as my friend says to me, she said, your job is to keep breathing. So it's my job to keep breathing. strategies for a normalish life as a mum. It's really hard. I had 2 children at the time of being diagnosed, and they were 9 and 11, and I was heartbroken for them. I just felt this is such bad parenting, dying in the middle of it. It's awful, and I was very worried about my children. At the start, when I was going through chemo, I tried not to kind of think too far ahead. So what I would do was I would just get out of bed in the morning, put on a wig, put on some eyebrows, and get dressed, get the kids to school, come home, and then I would set the alarm clock for 10 to 3, take a couple of tramadol, and wait till the alarm went off. Then I'd go and pick them up. So I didn't worry about washing or cooking or those types of things. I just prioritised what I had to do or what was most important to me. I also look for reliable and good role models for my children, people that I trusted and loved, who, when I died, I would feel that they would support my children in a way with values that were similar to mine. I also wrote a journal, not every day or every week. I just wrote when I felt like it. For example, when our dog died, I wrote to my children about Stella dying and how horrible it was and how devastated we were, but gradually over time there were little patches of the day where you didn't think about Stella and you did laugh and you did forget, and then gradually over more weeks you had more of those times, and then months later you still had the memories and you still loved the dog, but you weren't as devastated. And it was me trying to leave a little message for them when they were coping with me not being there anymore. Parent them towards independence. I kind of really wanted to spoil them, but I felt it was more important for me to parent them to be independent. So I had to kind of not mollycoddle them, to really help them become confident in themselves and to enjoy them. You know, before cancer, if I'm honest, I had a job, stepkids, my own kids, dog, cats, husband, and life was overwhelming. So I was rushing around a lot and I often didn't appreciate my kids. And after cancer, the cancer diagnosis, it really made me slow down and listen to my children. I remember one example is when I was taking my daughter and her friend to ballet. I mean, I hated taking them to ballet, but there were so many other things I could have done with my time. But after the diagnosis, I'd sit in the car and I started listening to them giggle and chat away, and I thought, how fortunate am I that I get this day to drive them to ballet. Miracle. Dealing with the fear of death and dying. I knew I had to cope with dealing with fear because I felt that fear fed my cancer. So I really believed I had to find some strategies to deal with this. Some people don't like to talk about dying or death. I needed to. I needed to make it clear how I wanted things to be. So I would talk to my husband. He didn't really want to talk about that, but it didn't matter. I kept talking to him, and gradually he became more comfortable with it. And I could say to him, you know, I want you to find somebody else when I'm dead. Not immediately, but in an appropriate amount of time. Also, that I don't want a drawn-out death, things like that. Try to release my desire for control over things I can't control. I can't control my blood results. I can try to control my fear and understand my family will survive my death. It's not the end of their world, it's just the end of mine. My medical team, that involved 3 different people. My oncologist, my GP, I had to find a new GP, and I found a wonderful, caring, inclusive, proactive GP who I have a lot of confidence in. He made me feel like he could find a plan and he hadn't given up on me. And my acupuncturist, and that's just me. These are the people that I rely on and I feel comfortable involving in my care. Of course, there's my support team. My wonderful husband. I'm very, very lucky to have him. I think we love each other and have a better relationship now than we did before cancer. And I feel very grateful for that. He's been loyal, and I've dragged him into my cancer diagnosis too. He lives, not all of it, not all of it he doesn't live with, but a lot of it he lives with it and goes along with me. So I'm very grateful to have his support. And it's the same with close friends. I have a small group of friends that I share things with. So it's not the number, it's who you choose, I think. And it's the same with family. Not all the family will cope, but a lot do. I really feel for my parents because it was very difficult for them. Looking back, well, how I dealt with things at the start is very different to how I deal with them now. I was very fearful at the start, but I've learned to limit those times of extreme stress. And I've also come to believe that the longer I live, the more chance I have of living. The last 2 treatments that I've been on for 4 years weren't an option for me when I was diagnosed. So I think things are changing fast, and I just need to do my job, which is to keep breathing. Lastly, today. Well, today I strive to live in the now. I strive to appreciate it. I strive to stay detached from outcomes. That was such an easy sentence to write, and it's such a difficult concept to follow. I surround myself with inspiration in my environment and the people. I let go of draining people. They take my energy, and you need your energy if you're trying to live with advanced cancer. I meditate and exercise, and I really like gardening. I find it a good escape to get into the garden. I prioritise and live with purpose. I realised that the most important thing to me was not travelling around the world, but it was being with my family and supporting and loving my family. And that's what I do. It makes me feel valued, and it's my priority. I block long-term thinking. I only think in 3 months because that's when I visit my oncologist. And I've learnt to be grateful. Now, when I was bald with no eyebrows and I'd vomited all night, if somebody had told me to be grateful, I'd have really wanted to slap them round. But I started off thinking, well, I'm in the situation I'm in. So I can either be grateful or I can be fearful. And I didn't like being fearful. It was a horrible feeling. So I decided to try to be grateful. And when I walked along Uruguay Beach years ago, I used to go, I'm grateful for the sunset, I'm grateful for the sand between my toes, and I didn't feel it at all. Then gradually, the more I said it, the more it became a habit. And now, I truly believe it, and I truly mean it. When I walk along the beach, I am grateful, and I do appreciate the things and the people around me. I'm also a bit kinder to myself. Now that my children have left home, I decided to look for a bit more joy in my life. So I didn't used to drink coffee or drink any alcohol, but now on special occasions, I think it's worthwhile for me, and I get so much enjoyment of meeting a good friend and having a cup of coffee. So I treat myself a little more than I used to. And that's about it. The last thing I'd like to say is to all of you who are on this journey with terminal cancer, that I wish you all the very, very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was really fantastic. We've had a couple of questions through for Christine. We'll do questions at the end after the 3 talks, so if you can just hang in there, that would be great. Now we're going to hear from Sinda Hall. Sinda trained as a nurse, but more recently spent 9 years in a supportive care role with Sweet Louise, which is a great organisation that many of you will know. They support women, people living with advanced breast cancer. So Sinda, what advice do you have for us based on your long experience?
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about supportive care. It is going to be a quick talk, but a lot to cover. And I think I'd like to start really by reiterating that last week was Metastatic Breast Cancer Day, which is an international day, and which I hope with time will raise awareness of where you people are at the moment. But I do acknowledge being surrounded by pink, the sea of pink at the moment during October, be it pink ribbons, the pink boas, and the wonderful upbeat campaigning that October Breast Cancer Awareness Month brings can be really tough for those living with metastatic breast cancer. I've entitled my talk, Pieces of the Puzzle, and really to begin with, the shock of a diagnosis can be compared to a broken jigsaw puzzle with masses of pieces that need to be sorted out and to try and make sense of what's happening. What are you feeling? Are you feeling lonely, afraid, isolated? And I'm no doubt you were feeling very vulnerable. But like the pieces of the puzzle, everyone is unique, and you react in your own way to the news that your condition is life-limiting. Whilst it's normal to experience feelings such as sadness, anger, confusion, helplessness, and the fear of the future that Christine's been talking about, it doesn't help you make sense of things. I think in today's world, the phrase balancing your work-life balance is bandied around constantly, and really, I think for many of you, it's much more than juggling your family, your life, and your work commitments. It's your current treatment, the prospects of future treatment that may be options for you further down the track. For many of you, it'll be trying to make sense of normality between healthcare appointments, taking care of yourself, and importantly, your family. There'll be many questions for which there are no answers, which you can make you feel very upset and actually can be quite overwhelming. But like Christine said, by gathering as much information as you can from reputable sources, can actually give you a sense of control. So perhaps speak to your oncologist, your breast care nurse specialist, whoever's involved in your care team to see if they can recommend any sites. And for some of you, joining an online community is the way forward. I'd encourage you to look at what's best for you. This is something you will find your way through. It means taking control of your life, taking control of who you share your information with. And also when it comes to the difficult conversations, who and how are you going to do it? But as Christine said, you take one day at a time. You will have heard that many, many times, but being confronted by major life decisions is totally overwhelming. Right, I'm going to talk a little bit about living well, and this is a huge subject. And just to start with diet and eating well, good nutrition is really important during ongoing chemo, and eating a variety of foods that you enjoy and that will actually help you cope with what's happening. If you are struggling with the side effects of chemo, when you're in the hospital, do ask for the Cancer Society Eating Well booklet. That might be enough to help guide you with some ideas. But if that isn't working, do ask for a referral to a dietitian. They're there for you. I'm in no doubt that you will have had many friends recommend diets, supplements that are going to cure you, just like Christine. But do check with your oncologist to make sure that whatever new diet or supplement you're taking is not going to react adversely with your current treatment. But for some of you, the best medicine is going to be physical activity. Exercise is huge, and it's a very important part of helping people cope with ongoing cancer treatment. If you haven't started yet, consider a type of exercise that you enjoy and suits your level of fitness. If you haven't been exercising for a while, sometimes walking with a friend might be a way of starting, but perhaps you may need to consider a support exercise program. And many of you will have already heard about Pink and Steel, which offer 3 different programs within New Zealand, and their programs are run throughout the country. The list of exercise options is endless, and I have no doubt that you know what's available in your area, but I just wanted to make you aware of a couple of extra ones that you may not have heard about yet. The first one is the green prescription. And this is actually given by a health professional, usually your GP or perhaps your practice nurse. And it's a support service that helps you improve your health through fitness. They offer a wide range of classes, can be anything from aqua classes to gym work to small walking groups. And it's available in centres all the way from Northland down to Southland. So that's the first one. And the second one is an Auckland-based one, which is the Exercise Rehabilitation Clinic, which is operated from Auckland University. It's a 12-week program that is run by qualified clinical exercise physiologists. And the program is for people that are living with chronic conditions. Both of these programs are free, and I would encourage you to check out the websites and find out more about it. There are obviously walking groups, and walking is probably one of the most basic things that you can do. It's convenient, it's enjoyable, it's safe, and now that we've got daylight saving, you're outdoors and enjoying the fresh air. Walking is ideal for people who've been inactive and perhaps prefer the less vigorous activity, and it's relatively easy on your muscles, joints, and carries a low risk of injury. Just wanted to talk briefly about Nordic walking. This actually began as an off-season training regime for skiers in Finland in the 1940s. But since then, Nordic walking has been globally practiced as a form of exercise for those patients that have had a breast cancer diagnosis. And there's very good research demonstrating the benefits of it. Around New Zealand, there are actually 50 leaders. So once again, do check out Nordic walking. Generally, being active has many benefits, and it's not just a case of getting fit. It helps with the tiredness, the fatigue, and sometimes the treatment side effects. For some people, it will help with anxiety and depression, but certainly not for everybody. And I think strengthening your muscles, your bones, your joints, and it's good for your heart. So why delay? Start a program today. Complementary therapies. There are many complementary therapies such as oncology, massage, Reiki, reflexology. Christine's talked about acupuncture. They're all wonderful in their own way, and I think as long as you're aware that they're used alongside conventional medicine, they have a very, very valued place in our world. Patients have often said to me that it can help alleviate the side effects of chemo, particularly the insomnia, the pain, and the fatigue. It helps them with stress, helps them relax more easily, and particularly with things like Reiki, it gives a greater sense of peace. And for some people, it's the mental clarity that they have after profound relaxation. Christine talked briefly about writing a blog or a journal. Journaling is one way where you can actually care for yourself. Just by writing down your thoughts gives you an opportunity to actually realize where you're at, and may help you relax and find reasons to be happier and more hopeful about the future. Crystal McGowan, who works at MD Anderson in Texas, described 4 different types of journaling. There's gratitude journaling, which is writing down everything that you're grateful for. So this actually focuses your attention on the positive aspects of your life. This may not be for you. Others might prefer to blog, which once again, I think we're becoming more and more familiar with. It could be a day-to-day commentary of your life. It could be talking about your treatments. But it's exploring your life purpose. The third type of journaling she described was art journaling, which is drawing, doodling, or perhaps scrapbooking. And it, once again, can help with your emotions. I think the one I like best, though, is line-a-day journaling, where you limit yourself to a single line or a sentence for the day. But there's no right or wrong way to journal, so perhaps one of these might be for you. Next thing I was going to talk about briefly was music therapy. People tend to think you need to be able to sing or play a conventional type of instrument. You don't. In a music therapy session, it may be listening to music, it may be using the music for guided imagery, it may be moving to music as well as listening. One of the main reasons that people like music therapy is because it makes them feel good. And I think all of us can relate to when we listen to a favorite piece of music, how good it makes us feel, it makes us relaxed. And UK cancer research describes music therapy as a safe place for people to explore fear, anxiety, anger, and the range of emotional responses to living with cancer. In Auckland, it's actually offered at Dove House. Meditation is a way to free the mind of cluttered thoughts and to try and focus on a more relaxed physical and mental state. Some people take great meaning from their religious and spiritual beliefs, but whether you consider yourself to be religious or not, you may find you are able to focus more on a meaningful life. People take many paths to reach what matters to them. Do what feels right for you. It's a case of living in the moment. And finally on this slide, relaxation. If you're feeling particularly stressed or anxious, try and learn different relaxation techniques and practical tips that can actually be used every day or during stressful moments. I think all of you can relate to the anxiety around waiting for the blood results, the scan anxiety. It's talked about much, but I think just consider what's going to work for you. It could be going for a walk, sitting on a bench enjoying a view, or perhaps trying some of the complementary therapies that Sweet Louise offers. Now I'll talk a little bit about emotional support. I think living with the different side effects and changes of cancer treatment is hard on you emotionally as well as physically. It brings up a wide range of feelings you're not used to dealing with. All of these feelings are normal, so don't be afraid to ask. There's the support of family and friends. Tell them how they can help you. Sometimes friends don't know how to help, but you could just ask them to walk the dog, pick up the shopping for you. But sometimes there are times you actually don't know what you want, and sometimes just verbalizing that can actually give your friends and family a chance to think what you might like. Try and keep life as normal as possible while you're getting treatment, and the children particularly benefit from routine. But so too do adults, because they find it's an anchor in their daily life. Seeking support for partners and children is an important one. Talking about the men first, at Dove House there's the men's group. Looking at support for children, there's the Lisa's Wish, Kenzie's Gift, and the Cloud Workshop, which is a creative program. Those are all in Auckland, and I have no doubt there might be smaller groups running where you are living. Canteen offer the Offspring program, which helps young people coping with an adult cancer. Create memories, do scrapbooking, photo collages. Think about programs in your area. And I think specific organisations in New Zealand, such as Sweet Louise, is a unique organisation which supports the psychosocial and practical and emotional needs for those living with advanced breast cancer. Support of other cancer survivors, such as a Young Woman's Breast Cancer Group, which is run by New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation, or online communities such as MetaVivors, which offer moderated sites. Seek support from other related charities such as Cancer Society, Look Good, Feel Better, and New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation's counselling service. Whatever you decide, it's important to do what's right for you and not compare yourself. When it comes to difficult conversations, remember it's a basic human need to be heard and understood. Breaking news is never an easy task, but breaking it at a bad time or in the wrong way can be even worse. Depending on the person you're talking to, find out how much they know and also work out how much you're prepared to tell them. Remember, it's your decision to find out and remember, it's your decision to find out and discuss what you're able to do. Find out what your trigger points are and subjects you're not ready to talk about. These may be related questions to what your treatment is currently, or are you going to die? Set boundaries about circumstances under which you're able to discuss your illness. Cancer is very personal, and you need to be comfortable with how much you share. I think giving yourself an answer to cope with some of these is really important. You may need to be quite direct. For example, I prefer not to discuss the details. And I think being clear is actually much more important. It's emotionally overwhelming to actually relive your story. So find a spokesman who's going to be able to speak for you, email friends, or use social media. Talking to the children is a huge topic, and really I think the most important thing is to be able to give the children enough information at an age-appropriate level. And just be sure that children need to know that they need to be cared for, who's going to take them to their football practice, and what does it actually mean for them. You may need to revisit it several times. The children's behavior may change. There may be regression. But I think consider the benefits of the children's support programs that I've spoken about. You're not alone in this. Friends often don't know what to say. Some friends find it better to say nothing because they're worried about saying something wrong. But there will be others who want to share the outcomes of stories they know. To be honest, sometimes your cancer diagnosis is big news in the community. And really, sometimes it's people just being nosy. In talking to your employers is a very personal decision about your cancer treatment. They don't need to know the ins and outs, but they need to know at what stage it's going to affect the ability to do your job. Most can be very supportive, but you might need to find that you consider accessing programs such as Sweet Louise, Psychosocial Services, Cancer Society, New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation, or local DHBs. Don't be afraid to ask your health professionals for help. If one organisation can't help, there's others. And I think looking at the future, really you need to look at your quality of life. What is your quality of life at the moment? Consider your mental and physical health, how you're managing your side effects of chemo, your body image, intimacy, relationships, stress, health and vitality, and the practical and financial issues relating to living with metastatic breast cancer. But then also thinking, how can you improve your quality of life? This is now your new normal. Life is never going to be without a challenge, but you need to search for the silver lining. Reflect on aspects of living well. Think about your relationships. Set short-term goals for yourself. And I'd just like to read out, in 2014, a young advanced breast cancer patient, Heather Lawrence, said, "To me, more women living longer, leading fulfilling lives while managing their cancer is something that should be celebrated. It's not about doing amazing things as the result of a cancer diagnosis or finding untapped creativity or amazing reserves of bravery. I'm not brave. I simply want to spend the rest of my life alive." And the final slide is Miffy's parting principles. There isn't a book that tells you how to come to terms with living with a life-threatening illness. I just wonder if I could leave you with Miffy's thoughts. Miffy died 4 years ago, but left us with these wonderful thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinda. Our last speaker is Juliet Ireland. Juliet's a registered health psychologist and has worked at Auckland Hospital with people with cancer for the past 10 years. She's also an honorary lecturer at the University of Auckland and also has a small private practice, so she's a busy lady. Juliet, you've put a lot of study and practice into the issues we're talking about tonight over the years, so can you tell us your thoughts?
Thanks, Adele. So following on from Christine and Sinda, I'm going to talk about a few things that people with advanced breast cancer have actually talked to me about the things that get in the way of living the life they want. And I'm going to start by talking about uncertainty. So most human beings find it incredibly difficult to tolerate a sense of uncertainty. We don't like the unknown. We don't like not knowing what's going to happen. And I think anyone can feel incredibly distressed and uncomfortable with this. I think despite the majority of life being pretty uncertain, we pretend it's not. But uncertainty is certainly accentuated with the diagnosis of advanced breast cancer, as there are so many unknowns that we are confronted with. I think what is very true is that because in general people find it very uncomfortable, this idea of uncertainty, other people in your life may actually dismiss it by saying things to us that they may think are helpful but aren't necessarily helpful. Things like, well, you'll be okay, or, well, no one knows what's going to happen to them anyway, or the classic one that I'm told is said to someone at least once a week, well, you could be hit by a bus tomorrow. Uncertainty can be very difficult for people to acknowledge as there. So what can you do to help with uncertainty? Well, I think one thing to do is actually to name it and recognise that it's actually normal. And say something to yourself like, well, this is uncertain and it's actually really difficult. Or a lot of people actually find this very difficult. I think a really important thing to do is to focus on what you do actually know rather than what is uncertain and what you don't know. What can happen is when you focus on what you do know, you actually lose sight of when you focus on what you don't know, you can lose sight of what you do know. So it's really important not to lose that sight. I think, as certainly Sinda and Christine have already said, getting information is incredibly powerful in terms of reducing uncertainty. And if your questions aren't answered by one person, keep asking them and move to the next person to get those questions answered. And finally, also, as Sinda and Christine have talked about, is about focusing on now. What is certain is now. What we know is happening now. Or you could even ask the question, well, what can I do today? Or what is happening today? So anxiety and depression go hand in hand with cancer and can occur at many different stages, from diagnosis and treatment and beyond. I think anxiety is a common word in our language, and it can be described in many different ways, from worry to fear to panic. And I think how people often will describe it is, feeling incredibly worried or being caught up in your thinking, not being able to concentrate or focus on things, feeling quite restless and not really being able to sit down and relax, having physical symptoms like shortness of breath or a pounding heart, shaking and trembling, that sort of thing. And actually, some people will describe feeling very out of control. And these symptoms can happen in quite a strong intensity or just a little bit of a background. Depression or low mood is often described by people as sort of having lost the spark. Loss of enjoyment or pleasure in activities, wanting to withdraw from people and kind of hide away. People will describe what I call the can't be bothered. It's really difficult to kind of haul yourself around and do things that need to be doing. Feeling tearful or irritable. Often people will say that depression is about feeling sad, but actually for some people it's actually feeling really irritable and grumpy, and it can be feeling quite angry as well. And I think another thing that's often really difficult in the face of a physical illness is things like sleep and appetite changes, which are really easy actually to attribute to physical factors, but they can actually be involved in low mood as well. I think what's important to also acknowledge is sometimes people who are depressed may also have thoughts of harm to themselves. What we do know is that anxiety and depression are incredibly common in cancer. And this may be for a variety of reasons. It may be associated with some medication, or the fact that we're going through an incredibly stressful time, the fact that someone's world has been sort of thrown off their axis, lots of different reasons. One of the things is that a lot of the research that's been focused on anxiety and depression has actually been focused on early breast cancer. So it's actually really difficult for me to be able to tell you how common it is in advanced breast cancer. But what I think is also important to note that when someone may be diagnosed with advanced cancer, they still may be recovering psychologically from their initial diagnosis. And then certainly having the advanced diagnosis can add a lot to this. A patient said to me recently, I'm still dealing with the echoes of my journey. And I think it's actually a really beautiful way of summing up how that actually was for her, and how it was still happening for her. Even though she was living a good life, she still had these echoes happening. I think what's really important, even if we can say that anxiety and depression are relatively common, it doesn't mean that we don't do anything about it. And there's a variety of things that can help, and many actually that Sinda and Christine have already talked about. And I think that the first thing that's really important is being kind to yourself. Things like looking after yourself in terms of nutrition, getting some exercise or physical activity, and sleep can be really, really helpful, even though that often when you feel like this, those are the last things you actually feel like doing. There's lots of specific techniques that can be really helpful. So breathing techniques can be incredibly powerful, especially with anxiety. Relaxation and distraction techniques also, as well as mindfulness, which I'm sure you've heard about in the popular media, whether it's about a colouring book or other mindfulness techniques. There's a growing amount of research proving that these are very, very useful in light of anxiety and depression and cancer. I think it's also possibly really important to talk to your doctor, whether it's your GP or your oncologist or another health professional that you trust. Seeking professional help is also really important, and it can be actually a really safe space to be able to talk about how you're feeling and to learn some strategies to help. The professional help can be through a variety of different organisations, so the Breast Cancer Foundation sessions which you can have through your local hospital or other organisations and NGOs. I think what's really important is that seeking help is not a weakness, and I know a lot of people worry about that. I see it actually as a strength. Often people will try and make sense of their experience, and with that may come a lot of questions about the meaning of life and actually what matters. And I think what we certainly know is that when people lose value or purpose in life, their emotional well-being is affected. However, we actually really talk about this out loud, and we often people who aren't in your position may actually really find it difficult to wrap their heads around it. Focusing on what really matters can impact on your quality of life in a really positive way, and Christine talked about that when she was talking. Your experience can actually be a time to reconnect with how you define a meaningful life and to make changes that are important to you. What's really also important to note is that what is important to you certainly may not be important to someone else. It's about what your meaning and purpose actually is. So some ways of connecting with meaning and purpose are simply actually asking the question, well, what's important to me? Some people will say that helping other people it can provide them a sense of meaning and purpose. But also sometimes seeking some support can also help, whether it's talking these through with a professional or in a support group, or actually even talking to a spiritual or faith leader. I think Sinda talked about journaling, and what we know from research is that writing can really help with connecting with meaning and purpose, and can be an incredibly powerful way and a safe space of being able to say some of those things that are important to you that maybe you don't want to share with anyone else. I think managing expectations is one of the hardest things to do. And why is this? I think that most people expect a lot from themselves and often are very much harder on themselves than on other people. And often people will hold the same expectations they had before their diagnosis. And if they're unable to meet these, they beat themselves up. And I think it's really important to be aware of this. Life isn't the same as it used to be. And even though you don't necessarily want to go too easy on yourself, sometimes you actually need to make allowances and not beat yourself up for things. It's okay to give yourself permission to do that. I think the same goes for managing other expectations of other people. And this is a really tricky area. Because I think often you won't want other people's expectations of you to change. However, there's always the people who forget about your situation and expect too much of you, and other people who certainly know about your situation and expect nothing from you and treat you with kid gloves. And it can actually be incredibly hard to manage these expectations. Because I suppose what a lot of people say to me is they don't want their illness to interfere with their life any more than it actually does. So, you know, it's a tricky balancing act. What I would say is that open communication with people, if it's not right, is really important. But I do acknowledge that actually that's a really hard conversation that sometimes you just don't want to have. So finally, I'm going to talk about talking to others. And we could actually do a whole hour on this topic. So I'm going to whiz through it. So as we've already heard tonight, people get a lot of advice. You've had a lot of advice from people. Most of it comes with really good intention. But I think that dealing with advice, especially unhelpful advice, can be draining and actually simply annoying. I encourage you to try this strategy, which is to listen to the advice, smile and say thank you, and not necessarily enter into a discussion about the advice. Another suggestion of how to deal with this is actually to nominate someone else to be sometimes the filter who will be able to respond on your behalf. So you're not in the tricky position of saying thanks but no thanks. Sometimes people can get offended if you say no thanks, so it's easier sometimes coming from someone else. I think dealing with other people and their reactions can be incredibly difficult. Instinctively, we try and protect other people, and I think we don't want to hurt them any more than we need to. So often people will choose actually to shut down and not say things to people because of how they know the other person may react or feel. I think this can make things better short term, but not necessarily long term. So I would encourage you to keep talking. I think certainly difficult conversations would be one of the hardest things about advanced breast cancer, but they also get harder the longer they are avoided. In terms of dealing with other people's stories, both good and bad stories can affect you. I think remind yourself that your story and what happens your story is yours, and what happens to someone else is actually not necessarily what happens to you. I think that people with advanced breast cancer can even feel that they can't share their story, as it may affect people at a different stage of illness to them. But I think what is really important is you can't protect other people from stories. And your story is just important as someone else's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. We're going to move on now to a question time where you at home can type in a question in the chat box and we'll answer those if we can and if we have time. We've got a couple of questions lined up, so we'll get started on those. The first is an easy one that I can answer. Someone's asked about how to access the New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation's free counselling service. You can get a recommendation from your, a referral from your doctor or breast care nurse, but also you can phone our breast care nurses on 0800 BC Nurse, and we'll have that number on screen shortly. You can phone them and they can refer you into counselling, and that's available everywhere around New Zealand. There'll be a local counsellor. You can either meet face-to-face or phone or Skype or whatever works for you. So let's move on to a couple of other questions. One for Christine. Someone wants to know, Christine, if you have kept working through this.
I kept working when I was first diagnosed with cancer, and then when I got my secondary cancer, I just walked into my boss and said, I've got secondaries in my liver and I won't be at work anymore, and I left. I left that job because I was a teacher and I can't teach a little. I have to do it a lot. So I didn't have the energy to do that job. Since I've found less demanding part-time work, and my husband's found more demanding, longer work, and that works well with me.
Perhaps a related question, and I'm not sure if we can answer this, but someone's asked about legal rights around employment when you're ill with being treated for advanced breast cancer.
Yeah, people certainly do have legal rights. I just wouldn't want to say something that wasn't quite correct, but
no. Okay, I'd suggest that if that's a question for you, contact our breast care nurse and we'll talk to them in the morning and make sure that we've got some information on hand about that. Okay, another question for Christine. Christine, this is about diet, what you do that feels good for you, perhaps not in huge detail, but just...
Okay. Well, while my children, because I really wanted to live until my children left high school. That was my goal. So I was very, very strict in those first 7 years or so. So I was a vegetarian. I didn't have any dairy. I didn't have any coffee. I didn't have any alcohol. I tried to grow all my own vegetables and that be kind of organic. So I was very, very careful. And then, like I think I said, I reached my goal. My children left school and they were 18 years old. And so I felt that I could just loosen up a little bit. And I have. So like I said, I have the occasional cup of coffee. And I have fish. And I really enjoy it. And every now and again, maybe at Christmas, I'll have some cheese. And it tastes really good. And I'm okay with that. I'm fine. So it changed. The way I eat and the diet I chose to follow changed depending on how desperate I was to stay alive.
Great. Thank you. Juliet, a question that touches on something you mentioned. Since I've had advanced breast cancer, my breast cancer friends are uncomfortable around me. How do I deal with that?
I think it's a really, really hard area, and I've certainly talked to a number of people who have been in that situation. And I think, I mean, there's a number of different answers to that question, and one, you know, that can be really upsetting, but maybe also having a bit of distance is okay. Maybe also having a bit of distance is okay. There's a loss there, but yeah, that can be okay. The other way of dealing with that is actually to possibly talk about it and bring that elephant in the room actually out in the open. Because sometimes people will be maybe worried about themselves, but also worried about you. So them being worried that they are okay and maybe you're not, and also vice versa, that you're worried about, you know, am I going to be like you? And so sometimes actually talking about it, even though it's an incredibly difficult conversation, actually brings it to the surface, and you're able to actually talk about what worries you or what the actual problem is. I think that possibly depends, though, on the strength of that relationship. But I think sometimes talking about it can be really useful, but also sometimes letting it go, no matter how hard that is, can also be okay.
Here's a question about exercise. I want to exercise, but I'm too tired. Do you have any tips for increasing energy levels? Sinda, do you have any?
Well, I think if you're keen to exercise, I'm not sure where you live in the country, but I would really encourage you to actually consider a support exercise program. I think you may have already done some of the Pink and Steel programs, but those are also for patients with advanced breast cancer. Wherever you are in the country, you would also be able to access the green prescription. And I think whilst you say it's very hard with the fatigue, I think don't be hard on yourself, because these programs really cope with that sort of thing. They're gauged for your fitness level, your mobility level, and your level of fatigue. So I'd seriously encourage you to make inquiry.
Okay. One more question about your diet, Christine. Do you eat wheat products?
Yes, I do, because it's very hard not to eat wheat products. But I think if I had lots of money and somebody to make me meals without wheat, I would really want to not eat wheat.
We just have a couple more minutes. Let's see. Just to say, we did have a medical question come through, a surgical question. We can't answer that in this webinar, but we will have future webinars coming up that will involve surgeons and oncologists and so on. Otherwise, again, you're welcome to talk to our nurses who do know a lot about the various treatment options. So they can talk to you about that. About talking to your children, telling your children about an advanced breast cancer diagnosis. We've talked a little bit about age appropriateness. Any more specific tips on that, maybe Juliet?
I think one of the really important things is that often people will worry about what do I say and how can I say it. And actually, you're the people who know your children the best. And actually trust that. Trust what you know about your kids and how they respond to things. I think there's something else that Christine touched on as well, is about having another trusted adult that they can talk to. That's outside, that's not you, because often they won't want to talk to you for a variety of reasons, but they will talk to another trusted adult, and that can be an incredibly powerful relationship that you can have some confidence in, certainly in terms of talking to your children. But I think it is a worry that people have, but actually to trust what you know about your kids and how they deal with things.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Sure,
Is that all right?
Yes.
When I told my children, I told them that I had a disease that was going to kill me, but they didn't know, nobody knew when it was going to kill me. So which is a some brutal language, but that's how it rolls at our place. Anyway, I said, it's over a long period of time, so you don't need to worry, because I promise to tell you when you need to be concerned. I promise to let you know if something happens where it's getting close. So now I've got lots of plans, and there's drugs, and there's this, and there's that. So we've got a plan, and it's all okay, kids, at the moment. And you can live your life, and don't worry, because I will tell you when you need to worry. And I think that was helpful for them. Hope so.
That sounds very wise. Okay, so that's our time up for tonight. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you very much again to Christine, Sinda and Juliet. We hope you found this useful and helpful. We'd appreciate if you'd give us your feedback as you leave the webinar. There's a very short exit survey. If tonight's discussion has raised any questions for you, our breast nurse Sarah is available until 9:30 p.m. tonight. Her number is on screen there for you. Later on, or rather tomorrow or during the week, you can call our 0800 breast care nurse line, and again the number's there for you. We've already talked about the free counselling. Our nurses can refer you for that, and so can your own doctors and breast care nurse. You may also have noticed that last week the New Zealand Breast Cancer Foundation launched a new app and online community for New Zealanders affected by breast cancer. It's called MyBC. You can download that from the App Store or visit mybc.care to sign up online for that. And that's an online community, gives you access to breast care nurses and to other people in the same situation as you. There are different subgroups, including one for people with advanced breast cancer, so you'd be most warmly welcome to join us there. If you'd like to watch this webinar again, it will be available online, or if you'd like to recommend it to somebody else, it will be available online at the end of the week, and we'll send you through a link to that. Otherwise, you can find it on the webinars page of our website. That's it from us. Thank you, and goodbye. Good night.
Good night.